right, everybody, just one sec. I'm just double checking my mic. All right. Okay, so today we are going to be continuing on with part 8, which is called Birthday. If you've seen the show, then you probably have some inkling about Janine's birthing scene and that whole disturbing ceremony that they perform every time they do a birthing ceremony. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get to reading this. Let's see here. Oh, actually, let's start with our little intermission. Okay. And page 109. All right, chapter 20. That should be good enough. The central staircase is wider than ours, with a curved banister on either side. From above, I can hear the chanting of women who are already there. We go up the stairs, single file, being careful not to step on the trailing hems of each other's dresses. To the left, the double doors to the dining room are folded back, and inside I can see the long table, covered with a white cloth and spread with a buffet. Ham, cheese, oranges. They have oranges. And fresh baked breads and cakes. As for us, we'll get milk and sandwiches on a tray later. But they have a coffee urn, the bottles of wine, for why shouldn't the wives get a little drunk on such a triumphant day? First they'll wait for the results, then they'll pig out. They're going in the sitting room on the other side of the stairway now, cheering on this commander's wife, the wife of Warren. A small, thin woman, she lies on the floor in a white cotton nightgown, her graying hair spreading like mildew over the rug. They massage her tiny belly, just as if she's really about to give birth herself. The commander, of course, is nowhere in sight. He's gone wherever men go on such occasions. Some hideout. Probably he's figuring out when his promotion is likely to be announced. If all goes well, he's sure to get one now. Of Warren is in the master bedroom, a good name for it, where this commander and his wife nightly bed down. She's sitting on their king-sized bed, propped with pillows. Janine inflated but reduced, shorn of her former name. She's wearing a white cotton shift, which is hiked up over her hot thighs. Over her thighs, not her highs. Her long broom-colored hair is pulled back and tied behind her head to keep it out of the way. So in the show, her hair is red, but on the book, her hair is like a broom color or straw color. Her eyes are squeezed closed, and this way I can almost like her. After all, she's one of us. What did she ever want but to lead her life as agreeably as possible? What else did any of us want? It's the possible that's the catch. She's not doing badly under the circumstances. Two women I don't know stand on either side of her, gripping her hands, or she theirs. A third lifts the nightgown, pours baby oil onto her mound of stomach, rubs downwards at her feet, stands Aunt Elizabeth, in her khaki dress with the military breast pockets. She was the one who taught Gyn Ed. gynecology education, I'm assuming. All I can see of her is the side of her head, her profile, but I know it's her. That jutting nose and handsome chin, severe. At her side stands the birthing stool, with its double seat, the back one raised like a throne behind the other. They won't put Janine on it before it's time. The blankets stand ready, the small tub for bathing, the bowl of ice for Janine to suck. The rest of the women sit cross-legged on the rug. There's a crowd of them. Everyone in the district is supposed to be here. There must be 25, 30. Not every commander has a handmaid. Some of their wives have children. From each, says the slogan, according to her ability. To each, according to his needs. We recited that 3 times after dessert. It was from the Bible, or so they said. St. Paul again, in Acts. You are a transitional generation, said Aunt Lydia. It is the hardest for you. We know the sacrifices you are being expected to make. It is hard when men revile you. For the ones who come after you, it will be easier. They will accept their duties with willing hearts. She did not say, because they will have no memories of any other way. She said, because they won't want things they cannot have. Once a week we had movies after lunch and before our nap. We sat on the floor of the domestic science room on our little gray mats and waited while Aunt Helena and Aunt Lydia struggled with the projection equipment. If we were lucky, they wouldn't get the film threaded upside down. What it reminded me of was geography classes at my own high school thousands of years before, where they showed movies of the rest of the world, women in long skirts or cheap printed cotton dresses, carrying bundles of sticks or baskets or plastic buckets of water from some river or other, with babies slung on them in shawls or net slings, looking squint-eyed or afraid out of the screen at us, knowing something was being done to them by a machine with one glass eye, but not knowing what. So the video camera. Those movies were comforting and faintly boring. They made me feel sleepy even when men came onto the screen with naked muscles, hacking away at hard dirt with primitive hoes and shovels, hauling rocks. I preferred movies with dancing in them, singing, ceremonial masks, carved artifacts for making music, feathers, brass buttons. Conch shells, drums. I liked watching these people when they were happy, not when they were miserable, starving, emaciated, straining themselves to death over some simple thing. The digging of a well, the irrigation of land, problems the civilized nations had long ago solved. I thought someone should just give them the technology and let them get on with it. So the idea of just giving a primitive society advanced technology, this is something that's covered sometimes in like Star Wars and Star Trek. I think Star Trek actually. This idea that, you could just explain how this stuff works. You could just give them the technology and then they could advance on to something more your level. But the reality is that you jump-starting things like that can actually contribute to a lot of strife and problems, because what happens when a bunch of people get this advanced technology that far surpasses the previous, the same thing that happens in regular society. The powerful get a hold of the technology, they use it to their advantage while they oppress others with it. My brother keeps sending me audio messages. I'll pay attention to that later. Anyway, let's see. Where are we? Aunt Lydia didn't show these kinds of movies. Sometimes the movie she showed would be an old porno film from the 70s or 80s. Women kneeling, sucking penises or guns, women tied up or chained or with dog collars in around their necks, women hanging from trees or upside down, naked with their legs held apart, women being raped, beaten up, killed. Once we had to watch a woman being slowly cut into pieces, her fingers and breasts snipped off with garden shears, her stomach slid open, and her intestines pulled out. Consider the alternative, said Aunt Lydia. You see what things used to be like? That was what they thought of women. Then her voice trembled with indignation. So, like, what she's showing them, it certainly happens. And it's freaking terrible and unfortunate. But that is not obviously a typical thing. That is not what most men do. That is not what men in general do. So it's like, here, we're going to show you the most extreme version of how men treat women that we can possibly find, and show you, oh, look how awful it was, look how terrible it was, while simultaneously watering down what's actually happening in their own freaking regime, acting like what the men are doing in their own regime is somehow like better or okay. And we find out later on just how not better and how not okay things can really be in their scenario. Moira said later that it wasn't real. It was done with models, but it was hard to tell. And the other thing is showing pornos, like I had to explain to my kid when I found out they had started watching pornos, and I had to like explain to them, like, yes, these pornos exist, yes, they're real people, but these are roles that they play. This is made to be something completely different from what most sexual acts are. This is made to be extreme and dramatic to get the attention of the people that are watching. And this is, for the most part, not how sexual relationships are supposed to be going. But yeah, we were a little more open with our kids about stuff like that, and trying to explain to them how to have healthy relationships, how to communicate properly with their partners, what's acceptable and not acceptable, that kind of thing. And we did set a bunch of limits after that to avoid them having stuff like that on their technology, try to keep them from being able to access it. But we still talked about that stuff openly with them to try to explain how things work. I mean, my oldest kid, even when I was pregnant, I would sit with my oldest kid watching birthing videos so that they knew what it would be like to actually go through labor and delivery. And the reality, though, was I was hoping that they would be able to be in the birthing room with me, and they were not. The doctors did not like that idea, so oh well. They got to stay with our babysitter at the time, who had horses and chickens and all kinds of stuff, which my oldest kid loved. So that was probably better to them, but we did watch all kinds of labor and delivery videos and stuff like that. Anyway, let's see. Where are we? Some Sometimes, though, the movie would be what Aunt Lydia called an unwoman documentary. Imagine, said Aunt Lydia, wasting their time like that when they should have been doing something useful. Back then, the unwomen were always wasting time. They were encouraged to do it. The government gave them money to do that very thing. Mind you, some of their ideas were sound enough, she went on. excuse me, with the smug authority in her voice of one who is in a position to judge. Who we would have to condone some of their ideas even today. Only some, mind you, she said coyly, raising her index finger, wagging it at us. But they were godless, and that can make all the difference, don't you agree? So the unwomen, if you haven't picked up on it, are people that are like activists and protesters, stuff like that. They protest the vile shit that goes on in society that we feel often, I think what she's talking about, that we feel oppresses women, like forcing them to stay home, not have a job, give birth for their men folks, forcing them into marriage, all the awful many things that Gilead is trying to put back in as a traditional and appropriate way of life. But getting a job for a woman, oh no, that shouldn't be happening. Protesting, oh no, that shouldn't be happening. Using birth control or anything like that, that shouldn't be happening. Like, this is all the stuff that she's talking about. If they're protesting this stuff for women to be able to have a job, for women to be able to choose what they do with their life, for women to be able to choose what they do with their reproductive system, that is what she sees as unwomen, which to me is just, I mean, I guess if you have a severely conservative view on what it means to be female or what it means to be a woman, that makes some sense. But to me, most women are not like that. We do not need to be stuck in a house, breeding children, not allowed to work, not allowed to protest the things that are harming us. Like, anyway. I sit on my mat, hands folded, and Aunt Lydia steps to the side, away from the screen. The lights go out, and I wonder whether I can, in the dark, lean far over to the right without being seen, and whisper to the woman next to me. What will I whisper? I will say, have you seen Moira? Because nobody has. She wasn't at breakfast. But the room, although dim, isn't dark enough. So I switch my mind into the holding pattern that passes for attention. They don't play the soundtrack on the movies like these, though they do on the porno films. They want us to hear the screams and grunts and shrieks of what is supposed to be either extreme pain or extreme pleasure or both at once. But they don't want us to hear what the unwomen are saying. First come the title and some names, blacked out on the film with a crayon so we can't read them. And then I see my mother. My young mother, younger than I remember her, as young as she must have been once before I was born. She was wearing the kind of outfit Aunt Lydia told us was typical of unwomen in those days. Overall jeans with a green or mauve plaid shirt underneath and sneakers on her feet. The sort of thing Moira once wore. The sort of thing I can remember wearing long ago myself. And me too. I definitely wore stuff like that every now and then. Her hair is tucked into a mauve kerchief tied behind her head. Her face is very young, very serious, even pretty. I've forgotten my mother was once as pretty and as earnest as that. She's in the group of other women, dressed in the same fashion. She's holding a stick. No, it's part of a banner, the handle. The camera pans, and we see the writing in paint on what must have been a bedsheet. Take back the night. This hasn't been blacked out, even though we aren't supposed to be reading. The women around me breathe in. There's a stirring in the room, like wind over grass. Is this an oversight? Have we gotten away with something? Or is this a thing we're intended to see, to remind us of the old days of no safety? Now, take back the night, I think this is one of those things that Aunt Lydia might have been like, okay, this is probably more appropriate work. Like she said some of their ideas weren't bad. And I think this might be one of those things where she thinks that those ideas aren't bad. But she views this whole idea of women fighting oppression and women fighting for freedom and all of that and fighting against traditional ideas as a problem. So overall, she sees this stuff as a problem. Whereas I suspect she might see the Take Back the Night portion of it as not being wrong-headed. But anyway, behind this sign there are other signs, and the camera notices them briefly. Freedom to choose. Every baby, a wanted baby. Recapture our bodies. Do you believe a woman's place is on the kitchen table? On the kitchen table. Under the last sign, there's a line, drawing of a woman's body, lying on a table, blood dripping out of it. Now my mother is moving forward. She's smiling, laughing. They all move forward, and now they're raising their fists in the air. The camera moves to the sky, where hundreds of balloons rise, trailing their strings. Red balloons with a circle painted on them. A circle with a stem like the stem of an apple. The stem is a cross. Back on the earth, my mother is part of the crowd now, and I can't see her anymore. I had you when I was 37, my mother said. It was a risk. You could have been deformed or something. You were a wanted child, all right, and did I get shit from some quarters. My oldest buddy, Tricia Foreman, accused me of being pro-natalist, the bitch. Jealousy, I put that down too. Some of the others were okay, though. But when I was 6 months pregnant, a lot of them started sending me these articles about how the birth defect rate went zooming up after 35. Just what I needed. And stuff about how hard it was to be a single parent. Fuck that shit, I told them. I've started this and I'm going to finish it. So at 35, I assume that a lot of you would know this already, but at 35, rates of things like Down syndrome and other neurological disabilities and deformities, things like that, start going up significantly for average pregnancies, which is why women that age and older having a baby, especially for the first time, are considered high risk. At the hospital, they wrote down aged prima para on the chart. I caught them in the act. That's what they call you when it's your first baby over 30. Over 30, for God's sake. Garbage, I told them. Biologically, I'm 22. I could run rings around you any day. I could have triplets and walk out here while you were still trying to get off the bed. So she's like, look, I'm in fucking good shape, and I am like biologically, like, or maybe health-wise, I'm like half the age of you people, so like, leave me alone. This over 30 thing doesn't really apply to me. And I don't know, does she have any, is there any validity to that idea that if you take really good care of yourself that you're less likely to have problems like that? There's probably some truth to it, but still it's not necessarily something that you want to like risk. If if you can get pregnant a little earlier. And maybe she just I mean, I think the hard thing is that a lot of women, when they get to that age, that is around the age where they start feeling like, if they haven't had a baby yet and they really want one, that is the age where they start really feeling driven to have one. So that can be problematic, because before then she may not have even had any desire to have a baby. She may not have been thinking about that. She was doing other things. She was running her life and doing what she felt was right, and having a baby at the time may not have even been something that she was thinking about. But like I said, around in your 30s, I think that's when a lot of women start feeling like if they're going to have a baby, like this is the time. So I guess it puts you in a little bit of a rock, and between a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because you're a little older, the risks are higher. But like if you keep waiting longer, it's going to be even worse. And before that, the things were not right. Things were not in place. Anyway, when she said that she'd jut out her chin. I remember her like that. Her chin jutted out, a drink in front of her on the kitchen table. Not young and earnest and pretty the way she was in the movie, but wiry, spunky, the kind of old woman who won't let anyone butt in front of her in the supermarket line. She liked to come over to my house and have a drink while Luke and I were fixing dinner, and tell us what was wrong with her life, which always turned into what was wrong with ours. Her hair was gray by that time, of course. She wouldn't dye it. Why pretend, she'd say. Anyway, what do I need it for? I don't want a man around. What use are they except for 10 seconds worth of half babies? A man is just a woman's strategy for making other women. Not that your father wasn't a nice guy and all, but he wasn't up to fatherhood. Not that I expected of him. Just do the job, then you can bugger off, I said. I make a decent salary. I can afford daycare. So he went to the coast and sent Christmas cards. He had beautiful blue eyes, though. But there's something missing in them. Even the nice ones. It's like they're permanently absent-minded. Like they can't quite remember who they are. They look at the sky too much. They lose touch with their feet. They aren't a patch on a woman, except they're better at fixing cars and playing football. Just what we need for the improvement of the human race, right? That was the way she talked, even in front of Luke. He didn't mind. He teased her by pretending to be macho. He'd tell her women were incapable of abstract thought, and she'd have another drink and grin at him. Chauvinist pig, she'd say. Isn't she quaint, Luke would say to me, and my mother would look sly, furtive almost. I'm entitled, she'd say. I'm old enough. I've paid my dues. It's time for me to be quaint. You're still wet behind the ears, Piglet, I should have said. No, you're still wet behind the ears, Piglet, I should have said. As for you, she'd say to me, you're just a backlash, a flash in the pan. History will absolve me. That was my speaker. History will absolve me. But she wouldn't say things like that until after the third drink. So after that, the alcohol has kind of knocked down her inhibitions a bit and let her off her guard and let her cause her to speak more freely, I would say. You young people don't appreciate things, she'd say. You don't know what we had to go through just to get you where you are. Look at him, slicing up the carrots. Don't you know how many women's lives, how many women's bodies the tanks had to roll over just to get that far? Cooking's my hobby, Luke would say. I enjoy it. Hobby schmobby, my mother would say. You don't have to make excuses to me. Once upon a time, you wouldn't have been allowed to have such a hobby. They'd have called you queer. Now, Mother, I would say, let's not get into an argument about nothing. Nothing, she'd say bitterly. You call it nothing? You don't understand, do you? You don't understand at all what I'm talking about. Sometimes she would cry. I was so lonely, she'd say. You have no idea how lonely I was. And I had friends. I was a lucky one, but I was lonely anyway. I admired my mother in some ways, although things between us were never easy. She expected too much from me, I felt. She expected me to vindicate her life for her and the choices that she'd made. I didn't want to live my life on her terms. I didn't want to be the model offspring, the incarnation of her ideas. We used to fight about that. I'm not your justification for existence, I said to her once. I want her back. I want everything back the way it was. But there's no point to it, this wanting. Okay, all right, hold on. Let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 21. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the more labor and delivery part of this section of the book, which is why we had Janine there being propped up, walked around. Let's get back to the reading scene. It's hot in here and too noisy. The women's voices rise around me, a soft chant that is still too loud for me after the days and days of silence. In the corner of the room there's a blood-stained sheet, bundled and tossed there, from when the waters broke. I hadn't noticed it before. The room smells, too. The air is close. They should open a window. The smell is of our own flesh, an organic smell, sweat, and a tinge of iron from the blood on the sheet, and another smell, more animal, that's coming. It must be from Janine, a smell of dens, of inhabited caves, the smell of the plaid blanket on the bed when the cat gave birth on it, once before she was spayed. Smell of matrix. Breathe, breathe, we chant as we have been taught. Hold, hold, expel, expel. We chant to the count of 5. 5 in, hold for 5, out for 5. Janine, her eyes closed, tries to slow her breathing. Aunt Elizabeth feels for the contractions. Now Janine is restless. She wants to walk. The 2 women help her up off the bed, support her on either side while she paces. A contraction hits her. She doubles over. One of the women kneels and rubs her back. We are all good at this. We've had lessons. I recognize of Glenn, my shopping partner, sitting 2 away from me. Excuse me. The soft chanting envelopes us like a membrane. A Martha arrives with a tray, a jug of fruit juice, the kind you make from powder, grape it looks like, and a stack of paper cups. She sets it on the rug in front of the chanting women. Of Glenn, not missing a beat, pours and the paper cups pass down the line. I receive a cup, lean to the side to pass it, and the woman next to me says, low in my ear, "Are you looking for anyone?" "Moira," I say, just as low. "Dark hair, freckles?" "No," the woman says. "I don't know this woman. She wasn't at the center with me, though I've seen her shopping. But I'll watch for you." "Are you?" I say. "Alma," she says. "What's your real name?" I want to tell her there was an Alma with me at the center. I want to tell her my name, but Aunt Elizabeth raises her head, staring around the room. She must have heard a break in the chant, so there's no more time. Sometimes you can find things out on birthdays. But there would be no point in asking about Luke. He wouldn't be where any of these women would be likely to see him. The chanting goes on. It begins to catch me. It's hard work. You're supposed to concentrate, identify with your body, said Aunt Elizabeth. Already I can feel slight pains in my belly, and my breasts are heavy. Janine screams, a weak scream, partway between a scream and a groan. "She's going into transition," said Aunt Elizabeth. One of the helpers wipes Janine's forehead with a damp cloth. Janine is sweating now. Her hair is escaping in wisps from the elastic band. Bits of it stick to her forehead and neck. Her flesh is damp, saturated, lustrous. "Pant, pant, pant," we chant. "I want to go outside," says Janine. "I want to go for a walk. I feel fine. I have to go to the can." We all know that she's in transition. She doesn't know what she's doing. Which of these statements is true? Probably the last one. Aunt Elizabeth signals two women stand beside the portable toilet. Janine is lowered gently onto it. There's another smell added to the others in the room. Janine groans again, her head bent over, so all we can see is her hair. Crouching like that, she's like a doll, an old one that's been pillaged and discarded in some corner akimbo. Janine is up again and walking. "I want to sit down," she says. "How long have we been here? Minutes or hours?" I'm sweating now. My dress under my arms is drenched. I taste salt on my upper lip. The false pains clench at me. The others feel it too. I can tell by the way they sway. Janine is sucking on an ice cube. Then, after that, inches away or miles. "No!" she screams. "Oh, no, no, no!" It's her second baby. She had another child once. I know that from the center, when she used to cry about it at night, like the rest of us, only more noisily. So she ought to be able to remember this, what it's like, what's coming. But who can remember pain once it's over? All that remains of it is a shadow. Not in the mind even, in the flesh. Pain marks you. But too deep to see. Out of sight, out of mind. Someone has spiked the grape juice. Someone has pinched a bottle from downstairs. It won't be the first time at such a gathering, but they'll turn a blind eye. We too need our orgies. "Dim the lights," says Aunt Elizabeth. "Tell her it's time." Someone stands, moves to the wall. The light in the room fades to the twilight. Our voices dwindle to a chorus of creaks, of husky whispers, like grasshoppers in a field at night. Two leave the room. Two others lead Janine to the birthing stool, where she sits on the lower of the two seats. She's calmer now. Air sucks evenly into her lungs. We lean forward, tense the muscles in our backs, and bellies hurt from the strain. It's coming, like a bugle, a call to arms, like a wall falling. We can feel it like a heavy stone moving down, pulled down inside us. We think we will burst. We grip each other's hands. We are no longer single. The commander's wife hurries in her ridiculous whitened cotton nightgown, her spindly legs sticking out beneath it. Two of the wives in their blue dresses and veils hold her by the arms, as if she needs it. She has a tight little smile on her face, like a hostess at a party she'd rather not be giving. She must know what we think of her. She scrambles onto the birthing stool, sits on the seat behind and above Janine, so that Janine is framed by her. Her skinny legs come down on either side, like the arms of an eccentric chair. Oddly enough, she's wearing white cotton socks and bedroom slippers, blue ones, made with fuzzy material, like toilet seat covers. But we pay no attention to the wife. We hardly even see her. Our eyes are on Janine. In the dim light in her white gown, she glows like a moon in cloud. She's grunting now with the effort. Push, 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 we whisper. Relax, pant, push, push, push. We're with her. We're the same as her. We're drunk. Aunt Elizabeth kneels with an outspread towel to catch the baby. Here's the crowning, the glory, the head purple and smeared with yogurt. Another push and it slithers out, slick with fluid and blood, into our waiting. Oh, praise. We hold our breath as Aunt Elizabeth inspects it. It's a girl, poor thing. But so far so good. At least there's nothing wrong with it. That can be seen. Hands, feet, eyes, we silently counting. Everything is in place. Aunt Elizabeth, holding the baby, looks up at us and smiles. We smile too. We are one smile, and tears run down our cheeks. We're so happy. Our happiness is part memory. What I remember is Luke, with me in the hospital, standing beside my head, holding my hand in the green gown and white mask that they gave him. Oh, he said, oh, Jesus, breath coming out in wonder. That night, he couldn't go to sleep at all. He said he was so high. Now, is that high as in high on drugs or high as in high on the situation? Aunt Elizabeth is gently washing the baby off. It isn't crying much. It stops. As quietly as possible, so as not to startle it, we rise, crowd around Janine, squeezing her, patting her, and she's crying too. The two wives in the blue help the third wife and the wife of the household down from the birthing stool and over to the bed, where they lay her down and tuck her in. The baby, washed now and quiet, is placed ceremoniously in her arms. The wives from downstairs are crowding in now, pushing among us, pushing us aside. They talk too loud, and some of them are still carrying their plates, their coffee cups, their wine glasses. Some of them are still chewing. They cluster around the bed, the mother and child, cooing and congratulating. Envy radiates from them. I can smell it, faint wisps of acid, mingled with their perfume. The commander's wife looks down at the baby as if it's a bouquet of flowers, something she's won, a tribute. The wives are here to bear witness to the naming. It's the wives who do the naming around here. Angela, says the commander's wife. Angela, Angela, the wives repeat, twittering. What a sweet name. Oh, she's perfect. Oh, she's wonderful. We stand between Janine and the bed, so she won't have to see this. Someone gives her a drink of grape juice. I hope there's wine in it. She's still having the pains for the afterbirth. She's crying helplessly, burnt out, miserable tears. Nevertheless, we are jubilant. It's a victory for all of us. We've done it. She'll be allowed to nurse the baby for a few months. They believe in mother's milk. After that, she'll be transferred to see if she can do it again with someone else who needs a turn. But she'll never be sent to the colonies. She'll never be declared unwoman. That is her reward. So in the book, no going to the colonies. In the show, a different story, although I'm not 100% sure on that, because in the book, she still has her episode that lands her in the colonies. But I don't know. I don't remember if that all happens, if all of that ends up commencing before this book is over. Because, as I've said, after this book, the TV show has to kind of branch off from the book on its own path, because there were no books between this one and Testaments. Okay, the birthmobile is waiting outside to deliver us back to our own households. The doctors are still in their van. Their faces appear at the window, white blobs like the faces of sick children confined to the house. One of them opens the door and comes towards us. Was it all right? He asks, anxious. Excuse me. Yes, I say. By now, I'm wrung out, exhausted. My breasts are painful. They're leaking a little. Fake milk. It happens this way with some of us. We sit on our benches, facing one another as we are transported. We're without emotion now, almost without feeling. We might be bundles of red cloth. We ache. Each of us holds in her lap a phantom. A ghost baby. What confronts us now that the excitement's over is our own failure. Mother, I think. Wherever you may be, can you hear me? You wanted a woman's culture. Well, now there is one. It isn't what you meant, but it exists. Be thankful for small mercies. So that is the one thing I think in this whole thing, is that there is this woman's culture. There is this togetherness of the women, of certain parts of the women, but it's a very different thing. And for the handmaids, there's this togetherness, this sisterliness with them. And even with the wives, I think some of the wives' stuff is very like forced and faked. It's roles they're playing, but still there is this camaraderie and this togetherness amongst them. But okay, on to the next one. And again, I had forgotten to turn that off. Chapter 22. So this one is going to be going into Moira's escape, which they kind of started to touch on in the previous chapter, but just barely touched on it. So now we're going to get into what actually happened. And I'll talk a little bit about the differences between what happened on the book versus the show. All right. Chapter 22. By the time the birthmobile arrives in front of the house, it's late afternoon. The sun is coming weakly through the clouds. The smell of wet grass warming up is in the air. I've been at the birth all day. You lose track of time. Cora will have done the shopping today. I'm excused from all duties. I go up the stairs, lifting my feet heavily from one step to the next, holding on to the banister. I feel as if I've been awake for days and running hard. My chest hurts. My muscles cramp as if they're out of sugar. For once, I welcome solitude. I lie on the bed. I would like to rest, go to sleep. But I'm too tired. At the same time, too excited. My eyes won't close. I look up at the ceiling, tracing the foliage of the wreath. Today, it makes me think of a hat. The large brimmed hats women used to wear at some period during the old days. Hats like enormous halos, festooned with fruit and flowers, and the feathers of exotic birds. Hats like an idea of paradise floating just above the head, a thought solidified. In a minute, the wreath will start to color, and I will begin seeing things. That's how tired I am, as when you've driven all night into the dawn. For some reason, I won't think about that now. Keeping each other awake with stories and taking turns at the wheel, and as the sun would begin to come up, you'd see things at the sides of your eyes. Purple animals in the bushes beside the road, the vague outlines of men which would disappear when you looked at them straight. I'm too tired to go on with this story. I'm too tired to think about where I am. Here is a different story, a better one. This is the story of what happened to Moira. Part of it I can fill in myself. Part of it I heard from Alma, who heard it from Dolores, who heard it from Janine. Janine heard it from Aunt Lydia. There can be alliances even in such places, even under such circumstances. This is something you can depend on. There will always be alliances of one kind or another. Aunt Lydia called Janine into her office. "Blessed be the fruit, Janine," Aunt Lydia would have said, without looking up from her desk, where she was writing something. For every rule, there is always an exception. This, too, can be depended on. The aunts are allowed to read and write. An exception. "May the Lord open," Janine would have replied, tonelessly, in her transparent voice, her voice of raw egg white. "I feel I can rely on you, Janine," Aunt Lydia would have said, raising her eyes from the page at last and fixing Janine with that look of hers through the spectacles, a look that managed to be both menacing and beseeching all at once. "Help me," that look said. "We are all in this together. You are a reliable girl," she went on, "not like some of the others." She thought all Janine's sniveling and repentance meant something. She thought Janine had been broken. She thought Janine was a true believer. But by that time, Janine was like a puppy that's been kicked too often, by too many people at random. She'd roll over for anyone. She'd tell anything just for a moment of approbation. So Janine would have said, "I hope so, Aunt Lydia. I hope I have become worthy of your trust," or some such thing. "Janine," said Aunt Lydia, "something terrible has happened." Janine looked down at the floor. Whatever it was, she knew she would not be blamed for it. She was blameless. But what use had that been to her in the past, to be blameless? So at the same time, she felt guilty, as if she was about to be punished. "Do you know about it, Janine?" said Aunt Lydia softly. "No, Aunt Lydia," said Janine. She knew at this moment it was necessary to look up, to look Aunt Lydia straight in the eyes. After a moment, she managed it. "Because if you do, I will be very disappointed in you," said Aunt Lydia. "As the Lord is my witness," said Janine, with a show of fervor. Aunt Lydia allowed herself one of her pauses. She fiddled with her pin. "Moira is no longer with us," she said at last. "Oh," said Janine. She was neutral about this. Moira wasn't a friend of hers. "Is she dead?" she asked after a moment. Then Aunt Lydia told her the story. Moira had raised her hand to go to the washroom during exercises. She had gone. Aunt Elizabeth was on washroom duty. Aunt Elizabeth stayed outside the washroom door as usual. Moira went in. After a moment, Moira called to Aunt Elizabeth. The toilet was overflowing. Could Aunt Elizabeth come and fix it? It was true that the toilet sometimes overflowed. Unknown persons stuffed wads of toilet paper down them to make them do this very thing. The aunts had been working on some foolproof way of preventing this, but funds were short, and right now they had to make do with what was at hand, and they hadn't figured out a way of locking up the toilet paper. Possibly they should keep it outside the door on a table and hand each person a sheet or several sheets as she went in, kind of like they do in some places in Europe. But that was for the future. It takes a while to get the wrinkles out of anything new. Aunt Elizabeth, suspecting no harm, went into the washroom. Aunt Lydia had to admit it was a little foolish of her. On the other hand, she'd gone in to fix the toilet on several occasions previously without mishap. Moira was not lying. Water was running over the floor and several pieces of disintegrating fecal matter. It was not pleasant, and Aunt Elizabeth was annoyed. Moira stood politely aside, and Aunt Elizabeth hurried into the cubicle Moira had indicated and bent over the back of the toilet. She intended to lift off the porcelain lid and fiddle with the arrangement of bulb and plug inside. She had both hands on the lid when she felt something hard and sharp, and possibly metallic, jab into her ribs from behind. "Don't move," said Moira, "or I'll stick it all the way in. I know where I'll puncture your lung." They found out afterwards that she dismantled the inside of the toilets and taken out the long, thin, pointed lever, the part that attaches to the handle at one end of the chain. At one end of the chain and at one end and the chain at the other. It isn't too hard to do if you know how, and Moira had mechanical ability. She used to fix her own car, the minor things. Soon after this, the toilets were fitted with chains to hold the tops on. And when they overflowed, it took a long time to get them open. We had several floods that way. Aunt Elizabeth couldn't see what was poking into her back, Aunt Lydia said. She was a brave woman. "Oh, yes," said Janine. "But not foolhardy," said Aunt Lydia, frowning a little. Janine had been over-enthusiastic, which sometimes has the force of a denial. "She did as Moira said," Aunt Lydia continued. "Moira got hold of her cattle prod and her whistle, ordering Aunt Elizabeth to unclip them from her belt. And then she hurried Aunt Elizabeth down the stairs to the basement. They were on the second floor, not the third, so there were only 2 flights of stairs to be negotiated. Classes were in session, so there was nobody in the halls. They did see another aunt, but she was at the far end of the corridor and not looking their way. Aunt Elizabeth could have screamed at this point, but she knew Moira meant what she said. Moira had a bad reputation. "Oh, yes," said Janine. Moira took Aunt Elizabeth along the corridor of empty lockers, past the door to the gymnasium, and into the furnace room. She told Aunt Elizabeth to take off all her clothes. "Oh," said Janine weakly, as if to protest this sacrilege. And Moira took off her own clothes and put on those of Aunt Elizabeth, which did not fit her exactly, but well enough. She was not overly cruel to Aunt Elizabeth. She allowed her to put on her own red dress. The veil she tore into strips and tied Aunt Elizabeth up with them, in behind the furnace. She stuffed some of the cloth into her mouth and tied it in the place with another strip. She tied a strip around Aunt Elizabeth's neck and tied the other end to her feet behind. She's a cunning and dangerous woman," said Aunt Lydia. Janine said, "May I sit down?" as if it had all been too much for her. She had something to trade at last, for a token at least. "Yes, Janine," said Aunt Lydia, surprised, but not knowing she could not refuse at this point. She was asking for Janine's attention, her cooperation. She indicated the chair in the corner. Janine drew it forward. "I could kill you, you know," said Moira, when Aunt Elizabeth was safely stowed out of sight behind the furnace. "I could injure you so badly so you would never feel good in your body again. I could zap you with this or stick this thing in your eye. Just remember, I didn't. If it ever comes to that. Just remember I didn't if it ever comes to that." Aunt Lydia didn't repeat any of this part to Janine, but I expect Moira said something like it. In any case, she didn't kill or mutilate Aunt Elizabeth, who, a few days later, after she recovered from her 7 hours behind the furnace, and presumably from the interrogation, for the possibility of collusion, would not have been ruled out by the aunts or by anyone else, was back in operation at the center. Moira stood up straight and looked firmly ahead. She drew her shoulders back, pulled up her spine, and compressed her lips. This was not our usual posture. Usually we walked with our heads down, our eyes on our hands or the ground. Moira didn't look much like Aunt Elizabeth, even with the brown wimple in place, but her stiff-backed posture was apparently enough to convince the angels on guard, who never looked at any of us very closely, even, and perhaps especially, the aunts, because Moira marched straight out the front door with the bearing of a person who knew where she was going, was saluted, presented Aunt Elizabeth's pass, which they didn't bother to check, because who would affront an aunt in that way? And she disappeared. "Oh," said Janine. Who can tell what she felt? Maybe she wanted to cheer. If so, she kept it well hidden. "So, Janine," said Aunt Lydia, "here's what I want you to do." Janine opened her eyes wide and tried to look innocent and attentive. "I want you to keep your ears open. Maybe one of the others was involved." "Yes, Aunt Lydia," said Janine. "And come tell me about it, won't you, dear? If you hear anything." "Yes, Aunt Lydia," said Janine. She knew she would not have to kneel down any more in the front of the classroom and listen to all of us shouting at her that it was her fault. Now it would be someone else for a while. She was temporarily off the hook. The fact that she told Dolores all about this encounter in Aunt Lydia's office meant nothing. It didn't mean she wouldn't testify against us, any of us if she had the occasion. We knew that. By this time, we were treating her the way people used to treat those with no legs who sold pencils on street corners. We avoided her when we could. Were charitable to her when it couldn't be helped. She was a danger to us, and we knew that. Dolores probably patted her on the back and said she was a good sport to tell us. Where did this exchange take place? In the gymnasium. When we were getting ready for bed, Dolores had the bed next to Janine's. The story passed among us that night, in the semi-darkness, under our breath from bed to bed. Moira was out there somewhere. She was at large, or dead. What would she do? The thought of what she would do expanded till it filled the room. At any moment there might be a shattering explosion. The glass of windows would fall inwards. The doors would swing open. Moira had power now. She'd been set loose. She'd set herself loose. She was now a loose woman. I think we found this frightening. Moira was like an elevator with open sides. She made us dizzy. Already we were losing the taste for freedom. Already we were finding these walls secure. In the upper reaches of the atmosphere, you'd come apart. You'd vaporize. There would be no pressure holding you together. Nevertheless, Moira was our fantasy. We hugged her to us. She was with us in secret. A giggle. She was a lava beneath the crust of daily life. In the light of Moira, the aunts were less fearsome and more absurd. The power had a flaw to it. They could be shanghaied in toilets. The audacity was what we liked. We expected her to be dragged in at any minute, as she had been before. We could not imagine what they might do to her this time. It would be very bad, whatever it was. But nothing happened. Moira didn't appear, and she hasn't yet. So in the book, it's Moira doing this by herself. She confronts Aunt Elizabeth. She ties Aunt Elizabeth up, exchanges clothes with her, and leaves on her own. But in the show, it's Moira and June working together. And June comes with her, but then at the train station, June kind of talks to one of these guards and keeps him busy and distracted while Moira gets away. That's not what they intended to do originally, but it's just the way things worked out, because this guard did start to confront her as Moira was getting on the train. And Moira appeared to not want to go, but June kind of nodded her on to go ahead without her. So that was Moira's first real escape. And later on we'll see that it does not work out quite how she wanted, but she does get away for a while. All right, and that is all I have for you today. I will see you on Tuesday. I did miss last Tuesday. I was working on other stuff and just completely forgot, and by the time I realized it, it was way too late. So I decided to just wait until today and continue on from there. But I should be here on Tuesday. I'll try to do Tuesdays around noon like I am today. And then later on in the late afternoon or the evening, I will get to the Night of the Seven Kingdom After Watch. I don't know. I could do noon or I could do 2 or 3. It depends. It depends on what's going on. Because actually Tuesdays, My kid does have that class. I always get confused because my kid has a class in the morning on Tuesdays, or around like the middle of the day. I think that's the issue, is that their class is in the middle of the day. So if I were to try to start at noon, I would either have just gotten home or I would get home a little bit later and then I still have to get things ready. So probably one or two I could probably start it. So anyway, so expect me on Tuesday sometime between like 12:30 and 2:30. And then expect me for the Night of the Seven Kingdom live after watch sometime that evening, probably around 6ish, because we like to do a walk in the early evening, so it takes us a little while to do our walk and then get back and clean up and get everything set up. Anyway, that's all I got for you for now. See you when I see you. Bye.